Let's see, we're going to go to Genesis 31 tonight, continuing our study of the patriarchs. So we're going to continue to be involved with Ron's ministry, and my family and I have been to Tampa with him. We've worked the back lot, and we've tracked with him, and it is a great opportunity. It really has. I've been involved in much of the writing of the tracks with the specialty tracks, like for Bike Week and the Gasparilla Festival, and many others. And that's been a blessing to me to be a part of that. And you can be involved, obviously, prayerfully. You can go track with Ron. Ron tracks local festivals, outside ball games down at Frontier, different places. He's always around Rochester tracking as well. And that is an opportunity for us to be involved with him. And also the Kids in Cans for Christ ministry that's been going on for quite some time now. And what that is basically is you take your returns, your 5-cent returns, and you donate the money to Little Red Book. That's basically Kids in Cans for Christ, and it goes right to printing tracts. So what we do here is all of the water bottles and things like that, we take them to a recyclable center. There's one on West Ridge Road out toward Spencerport called Nickelback. You can take your cans and bottles there and just drop them off and say, these are for Kids in Cans for Christ. They have an account, and that's all you have to do. Drop them off and tell them that. And they count them up, and they apply the credit towards Little Red Book Ministry. There's one near my house on Lyle and Howard Road. There's a new recycle center there. And that's what I do with the bottles from here, different places. I drop them off, say Kids in Cans for Christ, and they take those and they credit them. And or if you take yours back and you want to get the receipt and donate that back, you can do that, or the money. But it is a great opportunity, a very simple yet effective way to get some gospel tracts printed just by our pop cans and water bottles and things like that. So we appreciate that's been a great ministry over the years. So we will continue to support Little Red Book. Genesis 31, we're looking at the study of the patriarchs, and we're continuing to talk here specifically about Jacob, and Jacob who went to Syria with Laban, and Jacob was tricked into marrying Leah, and then he married Leah and Rachel, and they have had the tribes, the children together. And now in chapter 31, the Lord is allowing Jacob his release, so to speak, from Laban. It's time for Jacob to go back into the promised land, okay, after being gone for 20 years. And that's really where we're going to pick it up here in chapter 31, is Jacob leaving Laban on his way back to the promised land. So 31, it says in verse 1, and he heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory. Okay, now, wealth attracts attention. And this is the first mention of Laban's sons, and it's in the context of a little bit of jealousy and envy. Money and possessions and power and all those things will attract people's attention. A lot of times it'll attract it in a negative way and say, yeah, they're a crook. Sure, they stole from so-and-so. A lot of times the root of that is just jealousy or envy or whatever. But the fact is that God blessed Jacob and worked a deal we saw last time we were together, where if Laban said, you take the cattle of the spotted or the ring straight, whatever, those are yours. And God would make those cattle multiply in a miraculous way, and hence Jacob would become more wealthy than Laban. I don't think Laban was poor by any means. Then in verse 2 it says, and Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. Now, a countenance, when you look at somebody's countenance, You're looking at their facial expressions. You're looking at their eyes. You're just looking at, their demeanor toward you. That's a countenance, or toward others, okay? Now, I don't know. I'm sure that you have experienced this in some way, shape, or form, where somebody's countenance is different toward you than it used to be at one time. You know what I'm talking about? Okay, their demeanor toward you, okay? Now, in the ministry, over the years, that has happened to me on many, many occasions, okay? Where I think of this verse, I'm like, I don't know what happened, but that person's countenance toward me is different, okay? That happened not too long ago with somebody in the church. And I said to them, your demeanor, your countenance has changed toward me. I said, now one of two things, and my experience has been, it happens for one of two reasons. One, I have directly offended you. Believe me, I've done it many times, okay? Mostly not intentionally. Sometimes in my arrogance, pride, or immaturity, intentionally, okay? Either I've offended you, I said, or you're in sin. I said to the person, which is it? And he said, well, you haven't offended me. And that gave me an opportunity to encourage him to do better, do right, get right. But what happens is, especially toward the pastor, are you kidding me? You go out and sin, and you come to church, I'm telling you, it's on your countenance, folks. Like it would be on mine. It's on your countenance, okay? Because God doesn't bless that. And so you see somebody like, something's wrong there. Sort of the countenance. All right, well, Jacob knows enough, has enough life experience. He says to his wives, something's wrong here. The countenance is not toward me like it used to be. And verse 3 says, and the Lord said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. So he has a direct charge from God. Now he has the release to leave. Return. Interesting story. There was a ministry, another ministry inspecting this ministry for somebody else, okay? And I honestly really don't know the people, okay? They were checking out the ministry, all right? And one of the questions was, why, Pastor Brado, if you're not contemporary and you're, more conservative and they said, why did you stay so long at a church that was compromising, and that was their take, and contemporary? If that's not you, why were you there so long? And I said simply this. I said, because God didn't give me permission to leave. And I'm looking at this, 20 years here, and the Lord said to Jacob, return to the land. God will direct you when he's ready, won't he? Okay? So I said, furthermore, just so you know, a little extra, I said, you don't know anything about me or my ministry or what I did there, or the fact that I ran the Bible Institute and that all of my graduates that have gone out in ministry run a conservative ministry. They either pastor churches or on the mission field. I said, my graduates run a conservative ministry, not a contemporary one. So, and I'm not trying to justify myself to them, because I could care less what they think, but for the sake of the other party, I was concerned. Okay, so anyway, the ministry gets interesting. It gets interesting out behind the scenes, and how others view one another and the whole thing, and people getting nosy and all that stuff. So that's why, and I kid you not when I mean this, I want to be as independent as we can be. I mean that. I don't want, you say, well, who are you associated with? Jesus. the Bible. You know? And that, by the way, another question was, how come you took Baptist off? I said, wait a minute now. I said, I never had Baptist on. I never had Baptist on. We didn't have a name. And I understand the concern because a lot of churches that are removing the name Baptist is because they are compromising, they are contemporary. That's not us, though. We just decided to start with a more biblical name of Bible, Faith Bible Church, okay? So we could have been just called the church at Brighton, right? Like the Church of Corinth, the Church of Galatia. You know, people don't think. Where do you, pray tell, in the Bible see a denominational name tag? You foolish, shallow person. So, I say that to say, when God directs, Jacob, go back. Bob Brado, leave to start a church in this area. After much prayer, call it Faith Bible Church. When God directs, you just follow. Okay? You just follow. So Jacob returns. Verse 4, Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance that is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. And in hindsight now, over the 20 years, Jacob can see the hand of God. He says here, the God of my father, though, he's been with me. You know, sometimes we don't see it when we're in the middle of it, but sometimes looking back, you say, man, God was with me. Thank God he was with me. Verse 6, and you know that with all my power I have served your father. Great testimony, great example. He wholeheartedly served Laban. And your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. But God suffered him not to hurt me, because he probably wanted to. But the 10 times, no doubt he lowered his wages. He didn't increase them when he changed them. All right. And Jacob is a picture. Remember, Jacob's name is changed to what? Israel. So Jacob is a picture of the Jews in exile. They're out of their land. They don't have a temple to speak of. But what happens? They are preserved and they are wealthy. Is that not the history of Israel? They are preserved and they are wealthy. Don't have to be in the land. Don't even have to have the temple. God preserves them and he blesses them. They're wealthy. That's what happens here with Jacob. In verse 8 it says, if he, Laban, said thus, the speckled shall be thy wages, then all the cattle bear speckled. And if he said thus, the ring-straked shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ring-straked. So he recognizes that was the hand of God. Thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father and hath given them to me. And you know what? He'll do that. God will take away from somebody and give to somebody else as he sees fit, as he pleases. We'll talk a little bit about that Sunday in a principle of stewardship on the parable of the talents. Verse 10, and it came to pass at the time that the cattle conceived that I lifted up mine eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring-straked, speckled, and grizzled. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, here am I. And he said, lift up now thine eyes, and see all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring-straked, speckled, and grizzled, for I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. And it was a confirmation that God was saying, I have this under control. I see that you're being persecuted. I have it under control. I'm going to take care of you. Isn't life so much easier when you trust the Lord? Jerry, today, in the courtroom, isn't it so much easier when you trust the Lord and he just handles all of that? Verse 13, I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, where thou vowedest a vow unto me. Now arise and get thee out from this land and return unto the land of thy kindred. And he did vow a vow, And he said at the time, 20 years earlier, Lord, if you're with me and if you bless me, I'll serve you. That's essentially what he said. And now God brings it back to him 20 years later. Folks, if you vow a vow, God hears it, okay? God hears it. You know what? Some of you, I don't know about you, a lot of Christians have at one time or another said, I'll surrender and do anything God calls me to do. And it's 20 years later and they haven't done it. God didn't forget that vow. And I guess the point would be it's never too late. It's never too late. And he says in verse 14, Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, Is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Their reasoning, should we stay, should we go? Yeah, we got nothing here. And are we not counted of him strangers? For he has sold us and hath quite devoured also our money. Their inheritance, no inheritance for them, in other words. For all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours and our children's. Now then, whatsoever God has said unto thee, do. So they're telling their husband, we'll go with you. They know that they have left their father's house and now belong to their husband. Then Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives upon camels. And he carried away all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten, the cattle of his getting which he had gotten Padan Aram, for to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. And Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. I don't know what Rachel's thinking. But Rachel at this point is we've seen her full of envy. We've seen her steal. We've seen her lie. She seems to lack a little bit of character here. And now she steals these images. And these images, who knows what they were, but they're aids to worship, things that are prayed to, the St. Christopher medals and, the things that you see today. Even the crucifix, that's an aid to worship, and all that we get sucked into some of that stuff. And or statues or whatever it is, they become idols. Okay, there are aids to worship. Images. Thou shalt not make unto me any graven image. Okay, interestingly enough, the violators of that, the religions that violate that, they eliminate the second commandment. In their set of 10 commandments, Roman Catholic Church, for example, and their second commandment is not there. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven images. Why would it be? Look at the graven images, right? So they take the 10th commandment of coveting, and they kind of combine that into 2 to equal 10. All right, so that's the way that goes. All right. But she took the images. She'll get away with it. She probably kept them because in Genesis chapter 35, when we get there and they're trying to get right with God, it says in 35:4, it says that they took strange gods and their earrings and hid them under the oak. They were trying to get right with God. We'll talk about that when we get to chapter 35. But they had strange gods with them. They had to come from somewhere. And it's probably here where she stole them. All right, so she steals those. Verse 20, and Jacob stole away unawares to Laban, the Syrian, in that he told him not that he fled. He said, let's just get out of town. So he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river and set his face toward the Mount Gilead. And it was told Laban on the 3rd day that Jacob was fled. All right, so on the 3rd day, it is revealed that Jacob was fled, and again, Jacob becomes a type of Christ who escapes with his bride. Laban is a type of the Antichrist who put Jacob in bondage, 7 years at a time, so to speak. Verse 23, and he took his brethren with him, and pursued after him 7 days' journey, and they overtook him in the Mount Gilead. And God came to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said unto him, take heed that thou speak not to Jacob neither good or bad. I like that. God is just so straightforward. Hey, Laban, don't talk to Jacob. good or bad. Leave him alone, in other words. Okay? God's protection. Then Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mount of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, "What hast thou done that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters and captives taken with the sword, as captives taken with the sword?" All right, now these are gross exaggerations because we know the daughters went voluntarily. Okay, and we know God gave him permission to leave. "Wherefore didst thou flee away secretly and steal away from me? And thou didst not tell me. Then I might have sent thee away with mirth and with songs and with tabret and with harp." Now, obviously, that's probably the last thing on his mind. I would have sent you away in a celebration. We would have had a good old time, you know. No, that's not the case. "And hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Thou hast now done foolishly in so doing. It is in the power of my hand to do you hurt. But God of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, Take thou heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad." So, I don't know why he would make this statement. It's in the power of my hand to do you hurt, because God took that power away, didn't he? But he's still trying to boast it, kind of trying to threaten. You know, one of those, I ought to knock your block off. One of those kind of things, You know what I could do to you? You know how bad I can hurt you? Well, just be quiet then. You know what I mean? So, but this is kind of man's, nature to do these things. And he says, "And now, though thou wouldest needs be gone, because thou art long after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods?" All right, now, this is legitimate in that his images were taken, and they were looked at as gods. However, if they're looked at as gods, what kind of a god could be stolen? You see people's flawed thinking, how much they worship something, and yet those things are just vulnerable to destruction or being stolen, or they're just a piece of metal or a brass or whatever they are. And he says, "You've stolen my gods." That just sounds so foolish. And so, but he wants to know where his images are. "And Jacob answered and said to Laban, Because I was afraid, for I said, Peradventure thou wouldest take by force thy daughters from me." He answers honestly, "That's why I left without telling you." Then he continues and says, "With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. Before our brethren discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee, for Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them." This is the classic underestimating human nature, isn't it? I am convinced and sure nobody here took those. I've learned as I've gotten older, never say never about what somebody might say or do. You don't hear me say that anymore. They would never say that. They would never do that. No, they probably would. And I probably would. Okay? So, but that's Jacob is like, hey, if you find who did it, kill him, because I don't think it's anybody here. Now, Jacob obviously doesn't think much of idolatry. And himself, he has a clear conscience. I didn't take these things. And Laban went into Jacob's tent, into Leah's tent, into the two maidservants' tents. He found them not. Then went he out of Leah's tent and entered into Rachel's tent. Goes in there last. I would think that he would do it in the order who he thought took them, and then the last person would be the least that he would suspect. And that's probably what happened here. Now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture and sat upon them. And Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. And she said to her father, "Let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of women is upon me." And he searched, but found not the image. She's saying, "I'm not feeling well. I can't get up. I'm so sorry. and she hides those idols. And so he doesn't find them, even though they're there. He doesn't find them. Now Jacob doesn't know that they're there. And it says in 36, and Jacob was wroth and chode with Laban, and Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? Whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge betwixt us both. This 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of the flock have I not eaten. That which was torn of beasts I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it. Of my hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. And again, you see his work ethic and his character, that he took care of the things he was supposed to. I have served you with my whole heart for 20 years, and this is the thanks that I get? Sounds like corporate America, you know. This is the thanks I get? Yes, yeah, that's the thanks you get. Oh, okay. Thus I was, in the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from mine eyes. I have poured in and poured in and poured into you. Thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, 6 years for thy cattle. Thou hast changed my wages 10 times. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me. Surely thou hadst sent me away now empty. God hath seen my affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked thee yesternight. So Jacob can rest in that. Here again, here's what he's done. He has been flawless in his labor and been a good steward of the household of Laban. He's done everything that was asked of him for 20 years. He's being mistreated. That's what's going to happen, folks, right? You may give your all, you might be mistreated, okay? He's a little discouraged. But in the end, and this is the lesson for you and I, accept the God of my father. He knows God has preserved him. He knows that God could have made it worse for him. But God kept him. And the Lord said, and Jacob, understand, Laban, I know you would have done worse to me if God would have allowed you, but he didn't. And that's kind of how we need to view this world while we're here, right? Be a good steward, be a good testimony, be a good example. Walk out with your head held high after 40 years. Your testimony is still intact. And understand God is in control. And that's what he's saying here. The Lord's in control of this thing, Laban. You didn't treat me well, but the Lord's in control of this thing, and it could have been worse, and I'm glad that it wasn't. Okay? So he recognizes God, a little spiritual awakening here for Jacob in his life. And Laban answered and said unto Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou seest is mine. And what can I do this day unto these my daughters, or unto their children which they have borne? God didn't see it that way, did he? They're not his. Now therefore come thou, let us make a covenant, I and thou, and let it be for a witness between me and thee. And Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar. And Jacob said unto his brethren, gather stones. And they took stones and made an heap, and they did eat there upon the heap. And Laban called it Jigarsa Hadutha. But Jacob called it Galied. See, he's smarter. Just call it Galied. All right? Jigarsa Hadutha. Galied. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between me and thee this day. Therefore was the name of it called Galied. And Mizpah, for he said, the Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent one from another. And again, just looking that God would would he hopes would watch. But it's interesting that in type, Laban, again, Laban, Syria, Antichrist, Jacob, Israel, a type of Christ, they don't even speak the same language. The saved versus the lost, the dark versus the light. They're not even talking the same language. And the lost guy makes it sound like he's spiritual when he doesn't even really believe in the Lord God as his personal God. Believes in his existence, obviously, but he didn't believe in him in a personal way. Verse 50, if thou shalt afflict my daughters, or if thou shalt take other wives beside my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness betwixt me and thee. And Laban said to Jacob, behold this heap, and behold this pillar which I have cast betwixt me and thee. This heap be a witness, and this pillar be witness, that I will not pass over this heap to thee. Thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. The God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge betwixt us. Jacob sware by the fear of his father Isaac. Then Jacob offered sacrifice upon the mount, and called his brethren to eat bread, and they did eat, and tarried all night in the mount. And early in the morning Laban rose up, and kissed his sons and his daughters, and blessed them. And Laban departed, and returned unto his place. So there's the departure between Jacob and Laban. And God, for 20 years, worked on Jacob, sent him there, built character in him, saw some growth, and now sends him back to the land where he belongs. And just to kind of sum up this little phrase here in 55, Laban departed and returned unto his place. Whenever you see that, that's a negative connotation. That's a type of Antichrist, his place. That's said about several different people or people groups in the Scriptures, one of them being the Philistines, would return to their place. The Philistines were no good. A couple of them are I'll just show you real quick a couple of those. 2 Samuel chapter 18. 2 Samuel chapter 18. And this is when Absalom was killed, who was a type of Antichrist who tried to overthrow David and who was hanged in a tree like Judas. In 2 Samuel 18, verse 18, and that you see the numerology here, chapter 18 and verse 18, 666. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and reared up for himself a pillar, which is in the king's dell, for he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. And he called the pillar after his own name, and it is called unto this day Absalom's place. Absalom's place. Then, when you go to the book of Acts, and there are several, I'm just going to do a couple. Acts chapter number 1, when it talks about Judas Iscariot, Acts chapter 1, verse 25. And it says, this is all about Judas. It says this, that he may take part of this ministry and apostleship, Judas' replacement, from which Judas by transgression fell, that he might go to his own, what? Place. Judas didn't go to heaven. Judas didn't go to hell. Judas went to his own place. By the way, that place is the bottomless pit. That's where Judas is. His own place he went to. Okay? And so Laban, going back to his place, is a type of Antichrist who held Jacob, Israel, by sevens in bondage, and who tries to make a covenant with him that God has no part of. This covenant, by the way. This covenant that we read about tonight, this is a covenant that centers around images and idols, and that's the false covenant that the Antichrist will try to make with Israel. And it will center around false images and idols. Okay, Revelation 13, Zechariah 11:17 talks about the idols, the idol shepherd that leaveth the flock. So anyway, I say all that to say this is Jacob breaking free from Laban to go back to where he's supposed to go. That's a picture of tribulation and a restoration of Israel. And now you'll see in the upcoming chapters how Jacob kind of gets on his own here, and the story will then eventually shift to Joseph, who's the biggest type of Christ in the upcoming chapters in the Word of God. So, all right, so I'm going to stop there.